That, my friend, is how the world works.
That's an argument only a loser would make! A victor should speak of how the world should be, rather than how the world currently operates! I refuse to accept a world ruled by that thing! I am the victor! I shall decide how the world should be!
Sosuke Aizen is an evil, conniving, immortal false god dictating the fate of others who learns about the human condition through his battles. The most interesting piece of character writing within Aizen is his relationships and presence within every facet of the series. He's involved with Ichigo's birth, Rukia meeting Ichigo, Shinji becoming a visored, and much more. Aizen has etched his character into virtually every relationship in this series. The ironic writing is that Aizen himself lacks these relationships. The distance between him and others is measured perfectly within his vassals, the espada. The espada as a group are undead creatures banding together out of fear and survival of the fittest. Their ideologies are corroded by the end of the series. From loneliness to despair, all of these ideas are explored and answered within the espada to properly reflect Aizen. In this video, we will break down exactly how that is the case from least to most important.
すすれこれにカラス
Szayel reflects Aizen pretty perfectly with their scientific endeavors. Aizen and Szayel both experiment on their respective race in order to achieve transcendence. Where Szayel fails with his immortality, Aizen succeeds. Szayel dies in 80,000 years while Aizen is sentenced to 20,000 in prison. The madness reflected within Szayel is shared within Aizen in their poised position. Szayel stops mid-fight in order to get dressed and look presentable, similar to Aizen wanting to look formidable in battle. Within their flashbacks, we can also see how they are tricking and sabotaging their own team. Szayel makes Nell lose her position as number 3, while Aizen makes a dozen of captain class Shinigami lose their ranks and status. Within their different beats, we can see how Szayel directly contrasts Aizen in his endeavors. Where Szayel fails, we can see Aizen succeed. It is the narrative of madness being monitored. Left unchecked like Szayel, there's only one place you can go.
笑わせんな。打ち切れろ！
For Aizen, his rage and howl at the world's capitulation fills him with motivation. Similar to Yammy, he bears little regard for those who treat him well, and fundamentally screams out at the face of nobility and tradition. Aizen as a person wants to be recognized as God, and manipulates others to hold this perception of him, wonderfully reflected in his ability. However, when it all comes down, he cannot control his rage for the biggest cog in the system, ulquiorra. He felt lonely, he wanted to lose, he wanted to gain a new perspective, but above all that, he was angry at the world and those who maintain it. One can interpret this loneliness mixed with his anger as a rage towards his own self for not being able to connect with others and missing a fundamental step toward life. Yammy's own defeat is handled by two people he consistently underestimated while trying to prove his status on top. It mirrors Aizen's own defeat with Ichigo and ulquiorra, two people he underestimated because he was attempting to prove how he was beyond Shinigami. As the simplest espada, Zommari believes in a cold, hard fact of the world. There is dominion in all things. Subordinates are subject to their superiors. People are subject to their kings. The cloud are subject to the winds. The moon is subject to the sun. This ideology is mirrored within Aizen, who wants to shoulder the burdens of people looking for something to believe in and become that god himself. This ideology, however, is self-sabotaging. It delegates yourself to the system you're in, subconsciously or not. Aizen understands he is subject to the system of the world. Aizen fundamentally and mechanically cannot shoulder the burden of the three worlds like Ryo can. Therefore, Aizen is just another subject to the god he wishes to become and yet destroy.
ティブロ
Harribel is one of the most compassionate and driven characters in the series. Her aspect of death being sacrifice runs deep for a person like Aizen, who pushes the revolting state of the world away. Harribel believes no world exists without sacrifice, which Aizen rejects. It is simply the logic a loser would make. I personally believe Aizen shows his inklings of sympathy for his subjects, as perhaps he wishes he could have found a friend in one of them. Instead, he stands on top of their lives as sacrifices in order to fuel the world he wants to create, a contradiction that serves to show Aizen's fraudulence in the face of the world he lives in. Aizen lives to fight Yuha and reject the world he wanted to create by realizing this contradiction and repenting for it.
食い尽くせグロトネリア
Aizen likes to believe he is a weaver of fate. He planned the Sogyoku execution and even sent Rukia to Ichigo to spark off the story. However, for the most part, Aizen simply takes advantage of different events because of the convenient Valorant-like timing. Within his interactions with Isshin, there was no way for him to know Masaki was going to show up. He conveniently took advantage of the situation to birth Ichigo. When he told Ichigo he planned his life, there was no way for him to know Grimmjow and ulquiorra would be defeated, especially since ulquiorra almost killed Ichigo at the beginning of the arc. Aizen also had the intent to kill Ichigo in Soul Society, but could not because Ichigo had gotten stronger within his battles since he last saw Aizen. Aizen also never planned for Unohana to meet him and ran away from her as soon as she showed up. Finally, Aizen's plan was to create the Oken, but the Oken only spawns the royal guard at his feet. I say all this to say that, like aaroniero, Aizen is a parasite on people's lives, stealing others' abilities, forging and ruining bonds, being two-faced, and humiliatingly being defeated in one shot they could not perceive. Aaroniero is the weakest class of hollow who obtains strength through others' abilities, which is directly the case with Kisuke's Hogyoku. Aaroniero shows Aizen as a pathetic creature clinging to life like the insect he is. Throughout the entire story of Bleach, Aizen causes the most destruction. Symbolic destruction of tradition, emotional destruction of bonds, and even the literal destruction of himself. Grimmjow and Aizen are both free spirits that are subject to the one they resent and want to overthrow. For Grimmjow, he cannot handle anyone being higher than him. He must be the king. He has an ingrained fighting behavior that restricts anyone from trying to rule over him. Grimmjow reflects Aizen through the act of rebellion. Consistently acting against the greater good for his own actions is the embodiment of chaos that Aizen endorses. Grimmjow's entire backstory is a staple of his character attempting to find more out of being a hollow, masterfully reflected with Aizen going beyond Shinigami.
Kichiro Arrogante.
Baraggan shows Aizen exactly what he detests, a fraudulent ruler who is fundamentally unable to rule the world they govern. Aizen, however, parallels this fraudulence. Baraggan and Aizen both share lines reflecting their kingly disposition in the face of those they perceive as weaker. Baraggan's aspect of death is senescence. He can be seen as a representation of the fragile system in place Aizen hates so much. He topples Baraggan and shows him a mirror to his fragility, the hesitation to seek change and transcend beyond limits. Baraggan uselessly follows Aizen despite not wanting to, all to simply survive. Ironically, it was Baraggan's own senescence that defeated him, similarly to Aizen's own will being the reason why he was as well.
Resurrection. Segunda etapa.
Ulquiorra's fraudulent ideology mirrors Aizen's own fraudulence. Aizen's most loyal subordinate runs counter to what he believes. While Aizen believes there is a more formless existence and envisions something beyond sight, Ulquiorra denounces everything he cannot see. Ironically, Ulquiorra's own abilities contradict this. Ulquiorra being able to share memories with others is proof of the formlessness one can take. The hole in his heart, a motif for the formlessness one can have, perfectly symbolizing the rejection of the formlessness while Aizen embraces it. Ulquiorra Nnoitora's own nihilism can be interpreted as Aizen's own nihilism for the current state of the stagnant world, a rejection of the lack of meaning a world can have. A winner must ask how the world is. Nnoitora is the most explicit parallel to Aizen. Nnoitora is simply Aizen without the strength to achieve his goals. Aizen wants to break the stagnant cycle similar to how Nnoitora wants to escape it. While Nnoitora has a very doomerist approach to the world he lives in, Aizen is hopeful and wanting to change it fundamentally. Think of Eren and Reiner from Attack on Titan. While Aizen attempts to change the world and never submits, Nnoitora does exactly that. Their mutual refusal to accept something higher than them is also indicative of their lack of spiritual enlightenment. This is shown within their deceit to defeat their most formidable opponent. Nnoitora uses another person's ability to defeat Nell, while Aizen uses his own ability to trick Yamamoto. The same way Nnoitora wishes to die is exactly the same way Aizen is looking for an equal, subsequently and subconsciously looking for someone to defeat him. I personally feel like Stark's character is the perfect parallel to Aizen Kubo has written. From where we see Stark, we see a lonely man too strong for his own good. Furthermore, we see how mechanically Aizen and him are the same. Stark's Ryatsu was so high he literally could not stand to be around others. Aizen's Ryatsu is so high he cannot intimately connect with others with the Zanpakuto. Aizen at his core is a lonely man. When you are number one, you stand there alone. The rationalizations and lies Aizen tells himself are all in fear against this loneliness. Stark's literal killing of the people around him is reflected in Aizen's metaphorical killing by having a bubble placed around him at all times. They never saw the true Aizen. If they did, it might confirm to him how lonely he really is. Aizen has a small child inside him screaming and lashing out at the world because his core mechanic he cannot feel nor resonate with. Aizen was never without equal. He was intellectually challenged by Ulquiorra, he was physically challenged by Kenpachi, and spiritually challenged by Yamamoto. Aizen threw these challenges away in order to fulfill his childish desire for a friend and a bond. The same way, for a bond, Stark would throw away his strength.